welcome to another one of our online tools tutorials. My name is Ann Cunez. I will be your host this evening, meaning I'll be watching that question pane when you have questions, and we'll be delivering them up to our presenter, who is Susie Artsberger this evening. Susie's our Director of Information Technology, longtime employee, longtime investor. The topic tonight, I should introduce, is portfolio tools. The portfolio tools that we have in both the CoreSSG and the SSGPlus applications. So with that, Susie, I know we have a lot on the agenda, so why don't we get started?
We do. Thank you, Ann, and thank you most of all to all of our attendees tonight. So glad to have you here with us. If I'll just say it now, if for some reason that you have to leave or the session becomes interrupted, you're welcome to leave and either you can actually come back or we'll provide a recording to you via an email link or our YouTube channel. So let's get started. Tonight's webinar will give you an overview of how portfolios work in the online stock tools for better investing, the CoreSSG or SSGPlus. We'll give you an overview of those basic portfolio functions. We'll tell you how to update your portfolio, and we'll show you the portfolio reports that are with the SSGPlus and the CoreSSG and how you might use those. So Ann, I'm counting on you to help me out through the portfolio reports section. I know you're a master at that. If any of you have any questions, please let us know by writing in through your chat panel, and we'll try and handle them live. As I mentioned, a recording will be available within 2 to 4 days, and that will come in your link that we send you after the webinar. This is our standard disclaimer, and what we'd like you to take away from this is that if you see a stock tonight and you think you might like it, and I have it in my account, that doesn't matter. You should do your own research. I did. Well, I might have. I do my own research when I buy stocks, but you might see something in my account that I just put there for the heck of it. So please do your own research. Our webinar tonight is going to primarily follow the flow of our Portfolio Quickstart guide. And in your control panel, there's a handout section, and the Portfolio Quickstart guide is actually located there as a handout. It's also available in the tool in the Help and Information tab. And it gives you 8 easy steps to get the basic portfolio functions done. It's a little, just a couple page document. So please, that's about half of our presentation is going to cover that. And these are the 8 steps. We'll hit them live. Primarily, but this gives you a little bit of a rundown. This is what is in the Quick Start Guide. And before we go any further and get into the meat of it, I want to give you a little bit of an intro or overview to some of the differences in the tools. So let me just start off by saying the CoreSSG and SSGPlus both have portfolio functionality. Now, the primary reason that you're going to use portfolios is to organize your studies. If you caught the little little cowgirl on the front of our title slide, she was wrangling SSGs. So that's what a portfolio does for us. It lets us group together relevant SSGs. The most common use case for this is grouping together things that you have already bought or your club has already bought, so you can monitor your ongoing investments. And so CoreSSG and SSGPlus have that functionality. SSGPlus has more reports. There is a handout that details many more items comparing CoreSSG to SSGPlus that are in your handout panel, but these are some of the basics. I do want to point out that there's a price difference. CoreSSG is the basic core functionality for getting the stock selection guide done, getting portfolio work done, getting screening done, and so forth. If you have done a number of studies and you're comfortable, you might want to consider going to SSGPlus. And it has a lot more functionality. And the annual price all in is a little bit more as well. So I just want to point that out. There's also a primary difference in how you go through a stock selection guide. There's not a difference in what we're going to do with portfolios. But again, in the stock selection guide, the core SSG goes step by step. The SSG Plus is a 2-page SSG, so the workflow or how we get through a stock selection guide is quicker. I mentioned portfolios. There was a difference. How they're organized, how you add studies, how you add shares, all of that works the same. The differences are in the portfolio report. So the core SSG has one report. It is the workhorse of our portfolio reports, a summary report, one that we use most often. SSG Plus has a few more to help you manage your, primarily your investments and things you've already purchased. So those are some of the highlights of the differences that that you should be aware of. But again, that full document is in the handout panel. Another common question that we get is how to access. So before we go live here, let me point out that the most common way of accessing the online tools, whether they're core SSG or SSG Plus, is through this green box on the member homepage. It says online tools. So if I blow that up, you'll see that here. And then I've highlighted here in this orange, the My Studies button. If you click on that My Studies button, it'll take you right to the portfolio section of the tool. Really, where you're going to be working with your studies. So watch for that live. We're going to go right there. Once that opens, you're going to go into the second tab or the tool called My Studies. This is a button here this is where we're going to start a new study. This top accordion panel is where we will look at our portfolios that have already been set up and where our new portfolios that we will create will show up after they are created. If we click on that top accordion, the panel will expand down, as you see here, and we will see all of the portfolios that are already set up. In this case, I have one highlighted, Cash 22 Club. So this is a test club, and Cash 22 is just the name of it. It doesn't mean that there's 22 of anything, but that's just the name of the club. So watch for this area when you're in the My Studies section and when we go live. Now, if we click on the Cash 22 Club, what we'll see is a listing of the SSGs or studies that are in that portfolio. And as we go through, let me point out that you'll see the word studies a lot. It is synonymous with SSG. So we just call them studies in a lot of cases, but these are your individual stock selection guides. All right, moving on. Let's go live and get to the meat of things. And again, if you have questions as we go, even if it's just to say, hey, can you go back and redo that thing that you just did? That's totally fine. Our session tonight will overall last a little bit more than an hour, I think, and we have left appropriate time for question in there, so don't hesitate to ask those questions. All right, when we go live, I'm going to switch over to my browser, and we'll wait to make sure you guys can all see that. That should be great. You should be seeing my the BetterInvesting homepage on the screen. My name is Susie Artsberger, if you missed that when Ann did the introduction. And here is that green box that we talked about in the upper right-hand corner. Online tools. Here is the My Studies button that I am currently hovering over. And if I click on that, in another tab that's already open here is going to be the BetterInvesting Study Management section, and we see over here the tab is highlighted in green. It's the second tab down, and if I mouse over it, as I'm doing now, you'll see that the mouse over says My Studies. This is a tip that works a lot on web-based applications. If I mouse over something else, it may give me more information. We'll see that as we activate buttons and so forth as we go through our demonstration tonight. So this is the My Studies tab, and we're going to look at portfolios and studies as we see here. And the first thing that we're going to do is show you live what I showed you in the PowerPoint. And that is this top part, this top section is labeled portfolios. Right now it is collapsed. So if I click on that, it's going to open up and I'm going to see all of my portfolios. Right now I'm showing 10 at a time. I can see here that I actually only have 9 portfolios created right now. And I'll see a little bit about each portfolio. So I have that Cash 22 Club here. I see that it has 11 studies in it. Remember, that's the same as 11 SSGs. I see when I originally created that portfolio and so forth. I can add a description to any of these. I can actually put the brokerage account name in there as well. Some of them have them, some of them don't. Description and account name are not required. Study count will tell you how many SSGs are in the portfolio automatically. There's nothing that you need to do there. So one of the concepts that we need to stress is that when you create a portfolio, you do it by organizing completed studies. You don't start with a portfolio and then, well, you can start with a blank portfolio, but things aren't magically created. SSGs are not magically created when you create a portfolio. You're going to add your already completed studies. Do they have to be completed? Meaning, do all the judgments have to have been made? Not at all. You can put any SSG that you've saved into your portfolio. We have a great question coming in right now from Nancy who says, why would a person create different portfolios? Well, let me show you what I have and you can get a little sense of that. So I have a portfolio that's called Susie Personal, and it may have companies that I have invested in through my personal accounts. It could be my IRA, it could be a taxable account and so forth. I have a portfolio that is representative of an investment club. So, you know, just a little bit of a segregation there. Why would I want to separate those? Because my investment club doesn't know about my personal holdings. And we look at the performance of our investment club portfolio in its entirety. That you don't want the performance of stocks that I have picked on my own to be mixed in with the performance or factors, you know, fundamental factors from the stocks that the club has picked. So it just segregates them. So that's where we're just kind of lassoing and organizing all of our completed SSGs, which are showing at the bottom, into these various buckets or containers. You can also have another common reason for creating a portfolio is to put your watch list items in there. So these might be items that are not purchased, but you're considering purchasing. And so a follow-up question is, these portfolios are not just a collection of SSGs? Correct. The collecting of SSGs and organizing them is important, but the portfolio reports where you can review performance with a report or review your diversification, for example, is half the battle, at least, more than half the battle, Ann. What would you say, Ann?
I'm sorry. I wasn't listening.
Okay. Well, the question was...
I do apologize. I was reading these other questions. There's a lot of great questions that are coming in.
No, the question was, so these portfolios are not just containers and organizational methods. And I answered, no, they're not. There's the reviewing your portfolio's performance through the reports. Yes. So let me ask you a question, Anne. In terms of importance, or maybe how much you use one function over the other, organization versus performance review, which one would you give more weight to? Using the reports?
Yeah, for the reports, I am looking at the performance. And when we say performance, I want to clarify, because we had a couple questions about, tracking the transactions and, your performance of the investment as far as how much money you've made. And that's not what these do. When Susie's talking about performance, it's the fundamental performance of the company. Is it fundamentally performing well? Also, how is it going to return you your investment in the future? Has it grown in price such that my total return now, my expected return, I should say, might be low? It might be, under 5%. That could be an opportunity for selling. So I look at the portfolio reports all the time for my own portfolio, for my club portfolio, but you put those in context because you're looking at it as a whole. Like, what are my poorest fundamentally performing stocks, and maybe I want to replace those with some of the others that are performing better.
Right. I would say that once a portfolio is set up, you spend more time with the reports. And in our demonstration webinar tonight, however, we're going to spend about half and half of our time, half on all the things you can do to set up portfolios, delete them, add shares, and so forth. Then the other half of our remaining time is going to be on the reports that you can run and demonstrating those with some indications and discussion of how they are best used. That is not the primary purpose of tonight. Because it's a tutorial, we get more into the nuts and bolts of how to accomplish tasks in the tool. But we'll certainly hit upon that, and I'm sure Anne will have a bit to add on that later. And so we'll certainly get later to which reports that we can run. And let me just answer a question right now from Bev that says, do these portfolios have the same information as Toolkit 6 portfolios? For the reports that we have showing, currently, they're equal to or have more information than the equivalent Toolkit reports. So Toolkit, if you're unfamiliar with that term, you don't have to listen to this next statement, but it is, this thing might question and answer might not interest you. That's what I meant. It's an older desktop product that only works on a Windows computer. So our development is moving online, so we're putting our resources into improving these tools. Toolkit, however, has got a long history within our community, and many, many people use the reports there. So, for example, tonight we'll be looking at what we call a Pert Report, and it shows the identical information that's in Toolkit. So yes, there's a summary report in Toolkit. This version has a little bit more information, a little bit more flexibility. We have diversification reports in the online tools, and they have a little bit more information, and then the equivalent Toolkit reports and so forth. So I hope that answers the question. CoreSSG does provide reports. I'll go back to that Core versus Plus table that I showed you. Core has one portfolio report, and I will show you which one that is. It's the summary report. SSGPlus, which is where I'm working now, has the 4 reports. So that was another question that came in. All right.
Susie, I marked one up here that we could maybe chat about now as we're talking about the library and the stocks. But, Bill is asking, or William, I should say, I don't know if he goes by Bill. William is asking, can an SSG be in more than one portfolio?
Short answer, yes. So I was going to get there on how these are constructed and what we're seeing on the page here. So listen we'll cover that
We'll go with
question
the
real
short
quickly.
answer and then
Yeah,
yes.
short answer
Okay.
is absolutely yes. Think of the portfolio as just the container or method of grouping. And you can have one stock selection guide or study in multiple portfolios. Okay, so let's go back to our screen here. We have this top portfolio section with a little triangle next to it, and I can click that and it will collapse. I can click it again and it will open. I have my list of portfolios with a scroll bar on the right. If I have more than 10 portfolios, I can choose how many to display in that panel. Honestly, if you have 100 portfolios, I think I need to meet you because I really would love to know how you're using those effectively. But you could. There's no limit, frankly, on the number of ways you can group your studies. We don't provide any limitation there. Now, within the portfolio panel here, you can sort by name. So all of these columns displayed are sortable. That's what the up and down triangles mean. So I can sort by name of all my portfolios. And interesting, you'll see that I have a portfolio here that starts with a number, 2016. So it goes at the top of the list. The next portfolio is really kind of a dummy portfolio, but it is the All Studies portfolio. And if I click on that, what I'll see here is a listing down in the bottom section of all of the studies in that portfolio. So this one is just a way of showing me everything I have. Think about it that way. Everybody has an All Studies portfolio out of the gate. Now I'm scrolling down and you're seeing a lot of studies. Well, it gets worse. I am showing 25 at a time because that's the view I like to see. If you can notice the bottom text here, you'll see I have 536 stock selection guides saved. I create many per day just because it's the nature of my job. I've actually managed to save 536 of them. And the application is just fine with that in SSGPlus. So whatever we click on here, we're going to get that subset. So remember that Cash 22 portfolio? Let me click on that. And you're going to see the bottom section change to say Studies for Portfolio Cash 22 Club. So let's assume this is our test investment club. And we have 11 companies that we have purchased, and there they all are. That's the stock selection guide for my investment club. We have a watch list for the investment club. I'll be honest, I don't know how up to date that is. Not very up to date, but shorter list of stocks we might be considering. So that's kind of the rough nature of the layout of the screen. Top section is portfolios, bottom section is studies or individual studies. We can sort any of these columns. So let's say I want to sort my portfolios by date created. So I'm going to click on that and I can sort by ascending order or descending order. And we'll see that the last real portfolio I created was in May when we were at our BetterInvesting National Convention and had our Let's Talk Stock panel. So I created a portfolio from that. Let me go back to ascending order and you'll see that there are two default portfolios that do not have a date created. And those are the two I mentioned that everyone has, the All Studies portfolio, and then another one that helps, it's a little bit of a help to say, oh, these are all your studies that aren't in a portfolio. So when you're going through the process of aggregating, that might be helpful to you. Description, if you've chosen to add a description, this might be helpful. So again, sortable. You don't have to have one, so you see a couple of my portfolios have no description. And an account name. Again, not necessary. You'll see several that don't have an account name, and if I sort the other direction, you'll see several that do. This is just text. So if you add a brokerage here or an account name, it doesn't automatically connect up to your brokerage or anything like that. It's just text and is meant to be helpful for you. Study count, just how many SSGs or studies are in each portfolio. So one thing that's important to William's question was, is it a one-to-one relationship? No, I can have multiple portfolios that all have the same stock selection guide in them. Lots of times you don't really have a use for doing this, but it's not a constraint. You can do it. And let's begin by making a portfolio or a couple of test portfolios, and I can show you how that works. So to make a portfolio, you're going to come in here and say new portfolio. And we're going to give it a name. And one of the questions that I see coming in from our audience is, what's the difference between name and account name? Name is required. And it is the first column, and it is, let's say this is our webinar test portfolio. Let's just call it webinar test 1. Now, account name is not required, and I can leave that in the description blank. And it just says success. And I see my portfolio count has gone up to 10. If I scroll down, I can see that as webinar test 1. Let me create another new portfolio. And I'll call it webinar test 2. And I'll give it an account name of my Schwab account. Just information to help. And then you can put any description in there that might, again, be helpful. So I can save that. Now I'm into 11 portfolios, but I'm only showing 10 at a time. So let me show 25 at a time. And we'll be able to see webinar test 1 and webinar test 2. And you can see in the second test account, just additional text as a description and additional text that helps me identify the account name. So I hope that answered that particular question. Now, one of the next important things that you're going to want to know how to do is, how do I add stock selection guides or SSGs to that portfolio? And to do that, we're going to start working with our buttons here that are on the left. Remember how I said you could mouse over and get more information in a lot of web applications? That's what we're going to do. So let's take a look at these buttons. In fact, I'm going to zoom in on my screen, and you'll be able to see them a little bit better. So the first button on the left is called Refresh Portfolios. This is about updating, so we'll get to how to update portfolios in a minute. And then the second icon or button is Edit Portfolio. This is where we're going to add stock selection guides or studies to our portfolio. And this is where that Quickstart guide can help. After you've left this webinar tonight and it's been a couple weeks or a month or so, and you don't want to go back and figure out that 29 minutes in is where I describe this, the Quickstart guide is a really easy way of refreshing your memory. The third button or icon is a trash can, and that is for deleting the portfolio. You may be playing around and don't want it anymore. The trash can is to get rid of it. We'll go over that. And the last icon, which looks like a piece of paper with a fold on it, is meant to be a report icon, and it's how we access our reports. So let's go ahead and add some studies or SSGs to our portfolio by clicking on the edit icon. And we're going to add them into this portfolio. While I'm here, I could actually add some text into any of these while we're editing, but really I want to work, this is the important part for adding studies. How do I do that? Well, let's say my club has purchased Cognizant. And what I'm going to do is start typing the ticker. I'm actually going to reduce the zoom on this a little bit. I'm going to start typing the ticker of the company that I want to add, find it in the list, and you can see I have a lot of Cognizant studies. Most of you will not be using the tool this way, but remember I had that 500 studies. I set up one for tonight called WebTemp, a Cognizant study, so I'm going to pick that one, and we can see the name is listed here. We can't change the name of the SSG study right here, but what we can do is add numbers of shares. You don't have to. You can just keep it at 0, but let's say my club has purchased 20 shares of Cognizant. You can add fractional shares here, by the way. I didn't. Doesn't matter. Then I need to click this checkbox. If I don't, and I just go to save, it says, you're almost there. Looks like you want to add a study to the portfolio, but you need to click the checkbox. So I do that. Then I'm going to go on to my next one. So Fastenal, I created a test one for that. And maybe we own 30 shares of Fastenal. I'm going to quickly add other ones. Let's see, IPGP I set up, and maybe that's 10 shares. Apple. And so in all of these cases, you see I have a ton of stock selection guides already completed. It's not going to be as busy for you. LKQ. And maybe 20 shares of LKQ, and let's call it a day right there. So I have 5 stocks in my portfolio. It just so happens I have shares assigned to each. You know what? Let's add a 6th one and show you how we enter fractional shares. Priceline. So this is going to be interesting. I set up a temporary study, but let's say Priceline is so expensive, we didn't have enough money, and for some weird reason, we only bought half a share, 0.5. You can do that through some brokerages. The other use case that you might see is that you may have done dividend reinvestment with a company like T. Rowe, and you own 10.1234 shares of T. Rowe Price. So you can enter fractional shares. And then when I'm all set, I'm going to do save. Another thing that I'd like to show you, and I'm going to go down to my study and webinar test, and you'll see, or my portfolio, you'll see the study count here is up to 7. So if I click on that, we'll see all 7 of my stock selection guides here at the bottom. That's what's in this portfolio. If I want to edit the number of shares, I'm actually going to work in the bottom here, and I'm going to edit the study. Let's say Apple, we bought a couple more shares, or we bought 15 shares. I can change that. So let me show you on another company how I do that. I click on the correct portfolio. I see the stocks show up down below, and I click on the Edit Study pencil icon. And then I can adjust the number of shares that are in that portfolio. So let's stop right here and see that here I have a Cognizant study with a name of WebTemp with 25 shares. And going back to that original question, can I add that stock selection guide to more than one portfolio? Yes. So let's show you how that works. I'm going to sort this by name, and we call these webinar test portfolios. Here's the one, webinar test 1 with 7 studies in it, and webinar test 2 has nothing in it yet. Let's add that Cognizant study to both of them. So I'm going to click on the pencil icon to edit the portfolio. I'm going to find that Cognizant study and find the WebTemp version of that, and I'm going to add, I've got many Cognizant studies, and we'll be able to add the number of shares. Oh, hit F1 by accident here. of 10 shares there. And we can see that the webinar, we have one Cognizant study in webinar test 2 and 7 still in webinar test 1 with a Cognizant in both. Now, here's the Cognizant studies that we have already set up. We can remove them from the portfolio. So let's say I want to remove Fastenal. And to remove from a portfolio, I'm going to click on the portfolio, and then I'm going to click on the trash can icon for delete study. And then I'm going to have an option here. So let's watch how this happens. I'm going to click delete, and then it says, what do you want to do? Do you want to remove it from the portfolio only and not delete it from your account, or delete it permanently from your account? I just want to remove it from the portfolio. And I'll be able to say, okay, if we can refresh that portfolio, and that's what the refresh button is for. We'll see the study count go to 6. And if we click on that portfolio, we'll see that Fastenal is no longer part of it. One of the questions that is coming through here is that it says, when you edit shares, does it show you the different dates the shares were added? And I think this was similar to a question that came in earlier about monitoring performance of your purchases in your account. So this tool does not track transactional purchases because it really makes a difference. Let's say I bought Apple at $90 and then I bought Apple at $100, and right now, for example, if Apple goes to $95 on a closing price, one of my purchases will have made money, the other purchase will have lost money, and a transactional type of tool will be able to tell you the overall return. This is a rougher segregation. It's just a way of organizing your studies and looking at the fundamental data. It doesn't track purchase dates. If you would like some suggestions on a tool like that, I can provide them to you after the webinar, so just make a comment in the chat panel. But this is not about transactions. Okay. So moving on here on some basic information, we talked about adding SSGs to a portfolio, deleting SSGs from the portfolio, editing shares, deleting studies. Let's talk about deleting a portfolio. And we're going to go back up to the portfolio section here. I'm going to go to webinar test 2. And there's a delete icon up here. So I can just delete that portfolio, and it tells me that any studies belonging to the portfolio will not be deleted. So that is exactly what is going on here. They will remain in your account. The container is the only thing that goes away. So I'm going to say yes. And we'll sort by name and be able to see that that webinar test 2 is no longer available. It's only webinar test 1. Okay, let's talk about, let's go back to what happens when we click on webinar test 1 and we see the bottom section fill with those 6 companies that are in that pretend portfolio. Down here, you have a number of things that you can do, again with the icon. So let me zoom in again and scroll down so you can see it. And instead of the 4 icons for portfolios, we have 5 icons for stock selection guide. And again, if we mouse over, we have some things that we can do. We can update the study, we can edit the study, we can delete the stock selection guide permanently or just from the portfolio. Remember, we did that? So let me click on it again. If we delete study, we can just take it out of the portfolio, or we can delete it from our account, or we can cancel and do nothing. We also have a function to preview the data or to export it. So a lot of these functions are covered in some of our other webinars, but let me reset the Zoom here and show you just a few of them. Updating study. This will update a single stock selection guide. If we click here, we can update our study. We have a choice of updating the fundamental data and the price, or the price only, or update the study and create a copy at the same time. Typically, I do this: overwrite the company data in the study, including the data and the price. I'm going to say OK. And sometimes we see that little error message, and I do want to point that out because sometimes that will happen if the server is busy. And a lot of times we see we'll just flip back and be able to update it again. So we respond and look at all of those error messages, but I have seen it, and my suggestion to you is just to try again. Our edit study we talked about before. This will update the number of shares. You can actually change the study name here if you'd like. We can delete. We talked about that a couple times. And preview data is a quick stock selection guide front with the sales and the earnings and the price bars all together. And remember, in our methodology, we're looking for sales and earnings and price being up, straight, and parallel. That's what that's for. If you want to export it, that's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about tonight, but you can send it or save a copy in that toolkit format in case you're working with club members who are using the older toolkit tool. As we're talking about deleting, let me handle one of the other questions, and that is, if you delete something, is there a recycle bin to get it back? Actually, that is a great suggestion, and not at this time is the answer. So we do try and provide you a little warning before you can delete anything. And there's no recycle bin at this time to bring that back. Okay, one of the other questions that's come in a couple times is, can you update everything in your portfolio all at once? And the answer is yes. I'm going to go to that webinar test 1. Again, make sure that's the one I'm working with, and I can confirm it right here. And then the button that we're concerned with here is the first icon, and I will zoom my screen so you can see that again. That first icon, which is 2 arrows circling each other, is to refresh or update your portfolio. Okay, so I will be clicking on that. And our option here is to update prices, data and prices, or update prices only. So usually the update data and prices is the option that I choose. If you just want to do a quick prices only, select the second radio button and continue on. In this use case, it's going to overwrite the data in your study. It won't be creating copies. So we're just going to click Update Data and Prices, and then click on the OK button, and we'll be able to see that update. And there will be a, I'll do that again so you can see how that works, a success message, and we'll be on our way. One of the things to notice is that after that update happens, If we look at our individual studies down below, the date modified has been updated for each one of them. If you're looking at your account and want to know how current is the data, look in the date modified column. Great question coming in here. When you update the data, what data is it actually updating? Is it the estimates? No, it is not the estimates. It's just the underlying fundamental data. So let me open that Cognizant stock selection guide. So to do that, all I'm going to do is click on this yellow row and it will open and I'll see my Cognizant study come up. Here's that name, that web temp name that we talked about before. And the data that it's updating is the fundamental data that comes into the study from our data provider. We have annual data, we have quarterly data, and we have basic data. So for example, if some reason this company slightly changed their name, it would be updated. Usually we're looking at updates to quarterly and annual data and the last closing price. So more detail on this is available in our CoreSSG or SSGPlus tutorial webinars, but that's the data it's updating, not your judgments or your estimates. So let's go back to that My Studies tab and work through that. And we see our Cognizant study has been updated and all of the others have been updated. So that's the basics on there. And before we go on and look at reports, are there any questions that we should address here?
Yeah, why don't we address Jack's that is related to this? He wants to know, when you update studies in one portfolio, does it update studies of the same stock in all portfolios?
Jack, yes, yes is the answer. So when you update your portfolio through this icon on the left, it updates the underlying stock selection guide. And if that stock selection guide is used in more than one portfolio, then it will be updated in that other portfolio as well. So I hope that helps.
Great.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Jack, for Susie, for instance, it wouldn't update all of her 93 Cognizant stock selection guides, but it would just do the one that was associated with that particular portfolio.
We can actually look at that. We can let me go to all of my studies here. Okay, and I'm actually going to collapse the portfolio panel so you get a bigger view, and I am going to type in Cognizant up here. That is one way of seeing a lot of these Cognizant studies. So I have all of these Cognizant studies, and you can see only that bottom one in WebTemp that was in that portfolio got updated.
Great. I think that is good. So these other two I'm going to save for when we get into reports, and maybe we can address, Bev, we're going to come back to your questions. Don't worry, we haven't forgot. So talk about those.
Let's talk about some reports here. So to get to reports, we're going to open the portfolio panel by clicking on the word portfolios. I am going to sort by name to find that webinar test. I'm going to click on that and make sure I'm actually dealing in the webinar test portfolio. And then I'm going to go to the report icon. So I'm going to click on that report icon, and it will open in a separate panel or a separate tab of my browser. We do that because if you want to go back to your My Studies page, you don't have to keep using your browser back button or anything like that. So it'll just open in a separate tab. The default and what report is the summary report. If you are a CoreSSG user, this is the only button you will see is the summary button. SSG Plus has more reports. Actually, they have 4 total. Diversification is like a 2-in-1 report. In the summary report, we get to see a bunch of things here, and that is everything that's in my account. So here's the full view. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. We have the ticker. Again, all of these columns are sortable. The company name, in case you don't know what that ticker is. The price date. If this column, if anything is in red here, it means that your price date is more than 7 days old and you should probably update it. What that price was on that closing date. So these are from last night. How many shares we own of that. The total value, which is essentially the price times the number of shares for each of your holdings. Up top here, we see the total value of your account as a whole. Before somebody asks it, there's not yet a way to add cash to the portfolio, so this is just the stock portion of your portfolio. We will get to adding the cash piece in a later update. Okay. The current PE of your individual holding. If your study has been completed, your stock selection guide has been completed, you will see some other interesting information, and that is the currently calculated buy below price, the currently calculated sell above price, the currently calculated upside downside ratio, and potential total return, and where that current price here falls in within your zone and your theoretical recommendation of buy, hold, or sell. Up at the top, you have some aggregated data for the entire portfolio. This is the stock, complete stock value of the portfolio, the dollar weighted average for the upside downside ratio, and the total return. So we theoretically want to maximize our upside downside ratio and total return. So this gives you a nice baseline of where you're currently at. Each of these columns is sortable. So for example, I was looking for a company with the most total return. I could sort it descending and see that. I can scroll back and forth and see in my sample, and this is where, please do your own research. These are just tests. But in my example, Cognizant has the highest potential total return and is theoretically in the buy zone. You can have a company that doesn't have, has a decent total return but is in the hold zone. That will happen in our methodology. And you'll see that reflected accurately here. This report is the workhorse of your account and the portfolio. So in a club environment, we would look at this every month to get a sense for are any stocks popping up into the sell zone or any dropping into the buy zone. If we want to look at shopping within our portfolio, this is a nice place to start, picking out ones that have a potential total return and evaluating if that's the kind of stock we want to buy. In this case, maybe since we already own 20-some% of Cognizant, in theory, maybe we actually don't want to buy more. And that speaks to, keeping your portfolio diversified, which we will get to in a minute. Okay, so a couple of questions specifically about the data that's in this report about when does the price get updated. This is the closing price from the day before. So here's the date, and it is the closing price. It comes into our data feed, and we process it, and it's available to you by about 5 a.m. That's when our data typically rolls over every day. I've had the question about, can we get intraday pricing up to the minute, and so forth. And I have done some work looking at a data provider for that. It may add extra cost to our organization, so I'm going to continue to look. Okay. Current PE, I believe that was a question. How is this calculated? This is calculated from the fundamental data in the stock selection guide, which is the trailing 12 months, and then using the price that is stored in the study. So this is a reason to update your portfolio studies before you start running reports. So you're dealing with the most up-to-date data. And so it's using this price here, which came from this date, and the trailing 12 months of earnings, also called the last 4 quarters of earnings. That brings up a good question that I want to get to now. I'm going to swap back to my other tab, which is the study tab, the My Studies tab, and point out that there is, a lot of interesting stuff going on the left, but one of them is this Help and Information tab. If I click on that Help tab, you will see a load of resources, including the full set of Quickstart guides, links to all of our tutorials, and so forth. But if you have questions about data and how it's calculated, you want to look at this calculation reference PDF. And it is a work in progress as we answer questions and document everything, but you'll see things like, how is the current PE calculated? And we're trying to be very consistent, meaning wherever that term current PE is used, it's calculated in the same way. So that is a great reference. I'm going to close this tab down now. There's many things here for you to discover. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions that we can handle here. Can these reports in general be exported to Excel? No, that is a great suggestion, but not really. What you can do if you need to send them to somebody, and this might not be why you want to export it, but another thing is if you want to send them to somebody, you can create a PDF of any of our portfolio reports. So we're going to click on that PDF icon. It creates a PDF, and I can open that, and there is my summary report for webinar test 1. And again, let me go back and show you how to do that. This is the PDF icon that my mouse is hovering over in the upper right corner of the screen. Let's move on to some of our other reports. So there's a report called the Pert Report. Pert Report is a word that came into our vocabulary in the 90s and by a gentleman named Ralph Seeger, and his acronym stood for Portfolio Evaluation and Review Technique. So this was a way of looking at the fundamental data in your portfolio to see if anything needed further study. You'll see all of the holdings in this test account. You'll see many columns with interesting information. I will tell you that a class about PERT would take, I could use a whole hour to talk about some of the intricacies. Basically, though, I'm going to summarize it. What we're doing here is checking out some recent quarterly data versus our estimates. And where there is an underperformance, there is a pink indicator. And realize I'm heavily summarizing here. There's also a section on the right that deals with valuation. And things like, what is my projected PE? Now, this is different than current PE. It is defined the exact same way in Toolkit because this is a beloved Toolkit report. If you want to know exactly how projected PE is defined, you'll look at that calculation reference. Same with projected relative value. These are two terms that only exist in this report. We have not yet added them to our Stock Selection Guide Plus. But they might give you an indication of relative valuation, if things may be a good deal or a little bit overpriced. And then compared to maybe some projected 5-year PE ratios, average, high, and low. This is the estimated earnings per share growth that we have established for the company in our study. A PEG ratio. PEG can be defined as many things, and it is shorthand for the ratio of PE to growth. Again, defined in the calculation reference exactly. Upside downside ratio from the study, and potential total return. So this will be the same number that's on your portfolio summary report. Now this type of report, really the pink areas only change at each quarterly update. And we find that we're looking at this report not monthly, but maybe quarterly. So Anne, would you say that's a fair assessment of how your club does it?
Well, absolutely, since you're part of my club, Susie.
Awesome.
I'm just going to let that cat out of the bag.
Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, we find that we're not looking at this every month. We have a lot to discuss every month, and this report, since some of the, evaluating where the company might start to need more attention in terms of Apple, like the earnings per share growth rate compared to what our estimate was and so forth, doesn't need to get addressed every single month.
Not every month, but it can be a great activity to maybe look at these portfolio reports in detail, maybe once or twice a year, just to kind of keep everybody honest and see where everything is going, and we do that in our club as well. Maybe not as religiously as we should, but
right,
we're all striving to be better.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to ask my question. I'm going to answer some questions right here that have come in about PERT. Is this live data or from the study? This is from the stock selection guide. And so the price date, the price, the total return, all of that comes from the stock selection guide. The total return is not history. It's what our projected total return is from the stock selection guide. So I hope that helps clarify a few things here. Now, this is a report that a lot of clubs have used traditionally, so I'm going to answer one of Bev's other questions. Who can see my portfolios besides me? In this format, only you can see them. Can BI use them or see them to know what clubs or people are buying or selling? Well, this data is part of a cloud application. And in order for us to maintain the application and also help customers with customer service, we may help you look at your data. There is a spot in our stock selection guide where we look at and collect anonymously what people have projected for companies, and we would never do anything that specifically names a particular club or an individual study. But as part of having us maintain the application and help our customers, we are able to see from a corporate level only into the database. So let me answer the question a different way. We actually have many clubs who want to share this information amongst their own club, or in the case of model clubs, to post it so that others can see what's in their portfolio, particularly something like a dashboard or a summary report. And these are the areas where we're working on next. People actually want to share data amongst the people they choose to share it with. So those are some of the next features that we hope to provide. And but let's come back to Bev's other concern, is how secure is my information? So basically there's a limited amount of people, mainly developers, who can help support the application. They're securely locked, they're backed up. Our servers are deployed in locked, secure external locations that minimal people know about. We have passed payment card industry tests. So let's say it's on the order of the same way your brokerage information or your broker account information is stored. So we go through audits, we pass auditing tests, we check a number of these boxes to make your data as secure as possible, especially when we're considering something like a cloud application. So to make that corollary, All of your brokerage information is online. Whether or not you choose to access it like that, it is. And ours is not nearly as much personal information, but a similar concept with similar controls and similar audits. If you have further questions, drop me a note in the chat and I can respond to your concerns or questions individually about security of data. Okay, now moving on to our last report, which is actually one of the easiest ones. Let's talk about the diversification report. I mentioned that you might not want to buy more Cognizant because we already theoretically own a lot. We can find that out from a diversification report. There's typically two ways we're going to diversify our portfolio or look at diversification. And that is how many companies we own in a particular sector or industry, and then by size, which is an interesting concept. The default diversification report shows us how many companies are in each sector and industry. The top section of this report is a table. So each different sector is color-coded. I have consumer cyclical and two industries in there, leisure, which is Priceline, and auto parts, which is LKQ. Then we have the financial services sector with the asset management industry where T. Rowe Price resides, and technology, which has three industries in it based on the company. Now, this is all calculated automatically from where the companies are assigned by the Morningstar classification system. If you don't like the table-based view here, we offer you a pie chart. So we, in this view, see that we have a lot of technology companies. 65% of our portfolio is technology-based. It's an indicator maybe we want to look someplace else for our next purchase, or consider that non-diversified aspect if we chose to buy more in the technology sector. We can show you by individual industries, and we can show you how those by individual companies in this bottom pie chart. We also show you what sectors are not represented in case you want to go for more diversification. Now, if you are an expert in the market and you know what sector is hot and is going to be hot, that is terrific, and I wish you the best of luck. For many of us, however, we chose to maybe give up a little performance by diversifying across multiple sectors. You got two reasons. The economy, both local, U.S. and world, may be better performing in some sectors at some times versus others. The other thing is that Mr. Market, the big-time investors primarily, might be more interested in certain sectors than others at times. Those two don't always move together in terms of economic conditions and Mr. Market driving interest or growth in certain sectors, but sometimes they align. So by diversification through different sectors, you can reduce risk in staying out of 100% ownership of certain sectors that are not doing well at any one time, and perhaps grabbing some ownership in sectors that are really doing well. We definitely recommend diversifying your portfolio. If we get much deeper, we're kind of beyond the scope of the class. Let's talk about study data. There is two drop downs here. And remember the gentleman who asked earlier, is this live data or the data in the study? This is one of those reports that we chose to have this option of you can look based on the data in the study or based on current prices. So this doesn't update your underlying data, it's just a different view. And we default to the basic study data because that's how we look at a lot of the other reports. Now our fourth report is kind of hidden here. It's also a diversification report, and it is a company size diversification report. Companies come in all different sizes. So a size of a company in the BetterInvesting terms is based on how much revenue it made in the last fiscal year. And we have broken things down into small, medium, and large. And we see that in this portfolio, 50% of our holdings are with larger size companies. Oh, that's great. Maybe you love larger size companies. Maybe you think that they're more stable and so forth, more predictable. So that's certainly one aspect. I'm going to propose to you that small companies have some attraction because a lot of times they're small and they're able to grow at a much higher rate. In fact, we have some, not guarantees, not some rules, but some guidelines, if some soft guidelines that says small companies should grow at a higher rate than large companies. And so when you're looking at a small company, maybe you want it to grow around 12% or more in terms of your sales or earnings growth and so forth. Now, by diversifying across different company sizes, you can take advantage of maybe small, nimble companies with a little more risk versus very large, well-established companies who might be paying a dividend if that's attractive to you or your investment club. So diversifying by company size is an attractive way of reviewing your portfolio when you're considering where you might want to purchase next. I will tell you that a lot of our Better Investing investment clubs end up with a lot of large companies. There's two reasons for that. Many of the investment clubs like large companies that pay dividends. So they're overweighted in those types of companies. But a lot of times what can also happen is you've bought a company as a small or medium-sized company and held onto it through so many years that it grows into the large size company. So there's not a strict rule here of a certain percentage. It's something to consider the trade-off between large and small companies. And again, you have the table view up at the top and the pie chart view at the bottom. So we see in this particular case, IPG Photonics is one of the smaller companies at $900 million in revenue in the last fiscal year. And then you've got Apple, very other end of the scale with $233 billion in the last fiscal year. It's huge from a size perspective. Okay. And that is, let me go back and point out that any of these portfolio reports, you can generate a PDF. And Pert, Diversification, and Summary, again, reiterating that CoreSSG users have access to the summary report, but not the other reports. So if you're in a club and you're perhaps the portfolio manager for the club, maybe you want to consider SSGPlus, even if you don't do a lot of stock selection guides every year. Okay, so Anne, before we move on and wrap up the presentation, are there any other questions that we need to handle?
There are not.
Okay.
Except there was one. Okay, I'll handle this one. My box is clean. I've been keeping up, and you have been too.
Okay. So
thank you.
Returning back to our PowerPoint, we saw two different major topics out of our portfolio tools. One is the nuts and bolts of creating portfolios, deleting, adding studies, adding shares, deleting, and so forth. And then how to run portfolio reports, how to make PDFs, and so forth. I'll go back and remind everyone that this question mark in the tool, that is the Help and Information tab, can give you useful information on the online tools and tutorial recordings, the Quickstart guides, the full complement of them, reference materials that might be interesting to you, our FAQ and feedback forum. So if you have some feedback on how you'd like to see these tools improved, please visit our feedback forum and make a user request. And then a member benefit that I want to remind you of, which is that every member has access to our Introduction to Stock Selection Guide webinars. So you can access them from here if you're unfamiliar with where they might be located on the Better Investing member homepage. This is a screenshot of our user feature request forum. This is really only for the Better Investing online stock selection guide tools. I did have a question come in regarding how to give feedback on an iClub tool, and I would just say write into support for them on that. But if you can see 100 some feature requests that other people have made and how popular that request might be, you can vote on them, you can add a new request, and so forth. We also have an FAQ site for common questions, not just about the online stock tools, although that's what I have highlighted here, but about many other topics within the Better Investing community. And again, it's a link from the Help and Information tab. I'll show you the upcoming webinars list here. We have one in September and one in November. That's pretty much going to round it out for this year, and then we'll pick up again in January. So if you have someone who might need to know about the methodology, an overview of the methodology, and watch and go through it and using the nuts and bolts step by step in the CoreSSG, please send them to this tutorial. You can sign up at betterinvesting.org/webinars or watch your email for announcements. And if someone wants to know how to get through a stock selection guide using the SSG Plus, this is the tutorial to go to. It's always nice to attend live because you can ask some questions there. I'm going to take another question there was a question here about Toolkit. And
yeah, about transferring stocks, and I sent everybody to go register at Ticker Talk because we're talking about that tomorrow night, but go ahead.
Awesome. Can you pull an SSG from Toolkit into an SSG Plus portfolio? Yes, there is a link to import. I'm going to go back to the My Studies tab, import a Toolkit study. So if I click here, you want to use the ITK format, export out of Toolkit with the ITK format and import it here, and then add it to a portfolio. Yeah, or attend Ticker Talk and see it in action.
Yeah, just because she just showed the whole thing, it's really very easy. But we're going to show the other way too, going into the Toolkit from SSG Plus. Both ways, it'll be good.
Alrighty, well, I thank everyone for their attendance tonight, and if you have additional questions, please email us at service@betterinvesting.org. And thank you for all of the great questions tonight, and hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you.